Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are again, once again, into the breach. Another Sprocket Community Steel video. Hopefully you all been enjoying these videos. And let's kick off today with the 46-ton IS-2 from Nero. It's actually not a bad looking vehicle, and I know a lot of people are going, why am I seeing Sprocket logos all over the vehicle? Well, that's because the person that created this vehicle, Nero, used custom decals, and I didn't download the decals. I just downloaded the tank so I could feature the tank here today in Community Steel. And this tank is armed with a 122 millimeter main gun, and it has 175 millimeters of penetration. That's actually pretty accurate to World of Tanks when it comes to penetration on its 122 millimeter main gun. Well, at least without flaming gold at the enemy. It does actually have good armor and good mobility. I was actually quite surprised because I never considered in World of Tanks the IS-2 to actually be a well-armored tank, but the IS-2 here is actually, the armor is actually quite effective and does seem to hold up to quite a bit of abuse. Now this is for the mid-war period, but that being said, it does pretty good even against some of the late war period tanks that I have. You know, it's not really very good compared to, say, the IS-3, but, well, the IS-3 is actually more of a Cold War tank than a World War II tank. Let's just cruise around here a little bit so you can actually see its mobility in play. You've already seen it take a couple hits. And as you can see, a nice heavy tank, 46-ton tank, go up the hill no problem. Now we're going to fight some heavier tanks. Now the one thing is, I do believe I am shooting at ARL 44s, and, well, they actually do got a ridiculous amount of penetration to them. They actually have more penetration than this thing does, but, well, it's French, so it doesn't matter, right? Let's move on to the next vehicle. The next vehicle is the Fiat M1139 from the Flying Texan. This thing weighs in at 11.4 tons, and the 37 millimeter gun is actually mounted in the hull. This is actually based on a real-world tank. Once again, a lot of Sprocket logos all over it, and that's because he imported a lot of logos that are mostly dirt effects. But if you know anything about the Fiat M1139, the turret was actually armed with machine guns. Yes, folks, that's right. The turret was armed with nothing more than machine guns. That being said, the main gun had the hull had a 37 millimeter main gun, which at the time it would have performed okay, especially for a light tank of this caliber. Now that being said, it has 76.6 millimeters of penetration, so it does pretty well against most vehicles, or at least most of the vehicles I have currently in my Sprocket build. It does struggle against vehicles like the Man of War, some of the later Panzers, the Shermans, vehicles of that nature, some of your more heavily armored stuff. But, you know, this is an early war vehicle, and some of the vehicles I mentioned are actually later war vehicles. That being said, this vehicle would actually be in service with the Italians until the war more or less had ended for the Italians and they had surrendered. So this thing actually did go up against Shermans, and it definitely would not have performed very well against those Shermans. Realistically, this thing would have been useful for more of a mobile infantry support platform, especially because the turret was armed with machine guns. The 37 millimeter main gun could have fired armor piercing and high explosive. I'm not sure if the Italians had canister though. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they had some type of canister, because that just seems like a thing that most vehicles that were armed with like a 40 millimeter or a 37 millimeter gun had in its arsenal. Anyway, pretty nice design here from the Flying Texan. Now the one thing I do have to admit, in situations like this where I actually had all the decals loaded in, because I actually put this in my personal collection, whenever I did this mission with those decals on, I did have performance issues, especially because of how many of these things it spawns. That being said, it's okay if you're just running one, but if you're running more than one, you might have some performance issues if you add the custom decals. The custom decals honestly makes the vehicle a lot better, a lot more worn, things of that nature. Let's move on here. And the next vehicle I have here is from Japanese Shuriken, And this is his 57-ton Type 105 main battle tank for the late war period. It is armed with a 105mm main gun, and it's got 222mm of penetration. And in general terms, I feel the vehicle is actually very good. I kept it in the hull down, so I don't know how the hull will handle abuse, but the turret definitely handled the abuse that I put it through. The mobility generally is pretty good, although it does have some issues like trying to climb up a hill from a dead stop. But once you get it up and going, it really goes. It's got a fast reload too, which also gives me the impression that he did edit the document so that way it had a faster reload. But either ways, it's still a really cool looking tank. And I'll let this roll a little bit so you can actually see the features of the tank itself. Because the thing I think is actually probably the most cool is that he kind of used some historic references in this vehicle. The most notable one was actually he has a bunch of armor plates on the front of the vehicle, and it makes it look like it has ERA bricks, such as what you'd have on like a T-72B when it actually has the ERA on it. You'll see it here in a moment. I'm going to pan the camera around so you see it. It's also got a rear-mounted machine gun, which is kind of interesting. That was one thing that the Soviets kind of did and got away from. And then the 50 cal looks like it could be used by a person, but it might be actually there to be a remote 50 cal station. Now I'm taking some time here and I'm actually flexing the great mobility that this vehicle has. I mean, it's really mobile, it's really agile, and honestly the shape to it is just awesome. Nice small tight package that would actually work for per se if this vehicle was in service in Japan, which that's the idea. The next vehicle, we have a behemoth here from late war gain, and this is his 188.83 ton Kraken VT. Now it looks kind of like I believe it's the Carnarvon, the Swedish prototype, and is where he got the influence from this thing. But good lord, this thing is bigger than a mouse. Okay, it's actually about the same size as a mouse. And it is armed with a 93mm main gun, and it's got 300mm of penetration. Holy crap, that's a lot of penetration, folks. That being said, it is very slow. It actually, I never really met the top speed, but it really takes forever to get this thing to spool up its engine. It's not very mobile whatsoever. That being said, though, it is rather thick. I'm actually shooting at the other Kraken here, and it is just taking shots like a champ, and I'm shooting the lower glacis plate, which should be a weak spot for this vehicle, and it's just not taking it, although I did track it. And I did destroy it, but I literally had to roll up on its side and shoot it in the side pretty much flat. So it's really thick armored. Besides the thick boys, we have the KV5 here from SS Panzer. I'm not going to bother trying to say his whole name because it's difficult. But this is his 138.87 ton KV5. It is armed with a 107mm main gun. It is also very slow, as you can see here, but it is also very thick. This definitely looks like the World of Tanks KV5 in my opinion. It looks like a 1-to-1, although I do believe at 138 tons, that's actually quite heavy, even when you're comparing it to the World of Tanks vehicle. And of course, I got it stuck because I'm old and shit, and I always seem to get vehicles stuck in this game. Yay! And I don't get it out of that ditch either, folks, so I'm not going to waste your time. The next one here we have from Hamish Dunn. Yes, folks, you heard it right. This is a design from Hamish Dunn, the creator of Sprocket. And this is his Rheinmetall Borsig, and it weighs in at 29.4 tons. It has a 128mm main gun with 165mm of penetration. Now, that being said, it is thin armored, and realistically, the mobility is very average at best. It is made for the mid-war period, Although I did experimentations, and I cranked this up to 100 to late war, and it is ridiculously good as a late war vehicle, actually. Now, he did take some artistic license here. As you can see, it's actually got a fully enclosed turret, which the Rheinmetall Borsig did not have. Also, on the turret itself, it actually has a machine gun, like a coaxial machine gun. But that's the point of Sprocket, folks. Take influence from the real world and create it into something that you like. And I do believe Hamish actually did a really good job here with his Rheinmetall Borsig, even though I am not playing it the best. The best way to play this thing is really as a sniper. These enemy vehicles are actually a bit close for comfort, actually, for this Rheinmetall Borsig. The final vehicle I have here today is from some guy. Yes, you heard the name right. It is actually some guy with a Panzer IV F2, and this weighs in at 13.48 tons with a 75 millimeter main gun. This is made for the interwar period, and I swear to God, he had to cheat because this is probably the best performing interwar vehicle I've ever played. That being said, I have an M2 medium that performs extremely well, and this performs better than that. Up to this point, I have not found any tanks for the interwar period that actually performs better than my M2 medium. And here it is, folks, the Panzer IV F2. Now, that being said, this is actually more of a mid-war tank. Maybe you could push for early war, but it is more of a mid-war tank, and it does perform, like I said, very well. The mobility is just absolutely superb. The armor held up very good. The 75 millimeter cannon is actually really awesome, even though it does have a bit of drop off there. But you know, that's the problem with shooting 75 millimeter in the interwar period is, well, you tend not to have the velocity that can really carry that round at a far distance. So I would definitely recommend you all go check out this Panzer IV F2. And actually, it really looks like a Panzer IV. So he just did an amazing job with this vehicle. Good job, some guy, wherever you are, somewhere, someplace, somehow. Anyway, folks, that is this episode of Community Steel. Thank you very much for tuning in, and hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and hopefully I see you again for my next Community Steel video. And don't forget to like and subscribe and all that happy horse shit that YouTubers get their underwear in a bunch for. Anyway, once again, have yourself a wonderful day.